Hey Max,
Hey, buddy.
how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. A lot better now that I'm here.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about HubSpot is that it has a way of getting me excited to talk about things like expense management.
Oh, oh,
Uh, Now, how could HubSpot get me excited about that, you think?
I don't know, man. You got to tell me. I feel like you've been maybe traumatized by it. Would that be a good start? I know you have been.
Yeah. One of those things that's like, okay, we're spending all this money on this stuff. What are we getting back? Uh,
Where's the money
Well,
going and
we
why?
we got some sales happening over here. Like we had some really good conversations, Max, at this event.
Why was this booth $70,000? Did we were these first class plane tickets too expensive? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. Welcome in everybody. We're here to jam on event management and HubSpot, specifically ROI, and how easy that can be when you put your expenses right next to it, which you can do that very easily with HubSpot. And now, thanks to Event Happily, we're going to build happily today. Uh,
Yes. And
on
we're gonna,
top of
you know,
what
what we're
we're,
gonna do today. We're gonna start to heal. It's the healing process. If you're stepping into this live and you've been managing events on HubSpot and things like attendance tracking have been hard enough, but then you go and open up Google Sheets or probably Excel, and you open up that big, nasty, gnarly event planning spreadsheet that has 37 different sheets on it, a billion rows, and you can't make sense of it. Yeah, Joel, you got it. We're starting to heal, baby. That's what
yeah,
it's all about.
and something like this, uh, which has been attempted simplification has happened and sanitization. And like, let's see if we can not just traumatize everybody right
Attempted being
away.
the key word there. Yeah.
Right. So this might look familiar to some. It's one of those things where like everybody has created their own version, but they all say the same stuff usually.
Mm.
Uh, so uh, let's say we've got all of our events for the year. We've got dates, some dates we know, some we got some placeholders here. We know that's when it usually happens. Uh, we know where it could be. So we got some TBDs here. We got people that are going to be going. Sometimes we're doing it ourselves, and splitting the cost with whoever's helping. Sometimes we're sponsoring. Sometimes somebody else is doing all the setup, and we're just sending costs their way. We've got some project management, built in. Like, what are we doing to get all this stuff done? Carpet, gotta have carpet. Are we going to get padding? I don't know. I would like
Maybe.
some padding.
Hey, if we can
Um,
afford it.
but it's an extra couple $100, so I don't know if we can stomach that on top of the $70,000 booth, right?
No,
Uh,
no, don't
Electrical.
even get me started on electrical.
Uh,
Megawatts these days, man, they're expensive.
uh, Little side tangent there. One of the interesting points about like how digital transformation just impacts everything is, right, you're like, oh, we could start doing this stuff at the, let's just have a demo like to the location. And we're like, what's the internet gonna look
Yeah.
like? We're gonna be at the conference Wi-Fi that's like firewalled off just naturally, and
Yeah.
nobody can even get phone service. Those
Yeah.
demos are gonna work well,
It's one bar away from airplane Wi-Fi. All right. Yeah.
right? Um, and then we've got different collateral, different booth types, different stuff that needs to go based on the business unit or product or whatever that
Paperwork.
we're sharing. Uh,
Paperwork. Right. Even
yeah,
that just got a whole lot easier in HubSpot, right? With the upgrades to the file properties. Right.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
Um, which of course we always find a way for it not to be good enough, right? I saw a comment yesterday of like, man, this like 100 megabyte limit on this file property is rough. It's like, okay, if you're trying to put gigabytes in there, like maybe we should be using, something else. But of course, we got costs with all this stuff that we want to track, and at least this is one of the better versions where we are breaking this stuff out. We're splitting these costs across these divisions.
This is a better version, Chris. This is
better,
the better version. Are we looking at the gold standard of these types of spreadsheets?
I wouldn't say gold standard, but it's capturing. Like at this point, I'm just happy if we're capturing the data. Yeah. And instead of like, okay, we spent, 61K this year across all these divisions, but we don't have it split up, right? And usually there's like one or two that like bring in like 80% of the business, So this is touching on like what we believe that we can help with by doing this in a system like HubSpot.
Absolutely. Cool.
So
should we start talking about what we built, man? Let's start showing people the healing process. It begins now, right? Let me go ahead and get my little screen share up here. Present, share screen, entire screen. This one. Boom. Boom. I think you need to pull it up.
I am adding it to the stage now.
Yeah. Awesome. So why don't we set the scene a little bit? Right. So, hey guys, by the way, I'm Max. I'm the chief evangelist over at a company called Hapily. We build wonderful apps for the HubSpot platform. And one of the newest apps that we've put into beta recently, and you've probably heard us talk about it a whole bunch. If you were here on the last live I did with Chris, we were giving you sort of like a walkthrough of how you can create events, create registrations, get people to sign up, be able to track attendance, whether it's virtual or in person, like all these fun things, right? But something that's like really been key that I've kind of figured out, and it kind of rolls into the argument of like why manage events inside of your CRM, right? I've been really thinking about this, event object that we started with, right? When we were doing our live last time, and you've probably seen it in some of like the videos that we did, right? So when we look at this event record, right? In terms of like the data structure with Event Hapily and all that stuff, it's really meant to be sort of this like overall record that you then have a number of sessions or maybe even just a single session associated to. And the sessions are like what people actually sign up for, right? But the event object itself sort of represents that event as a whole, right? And the sessions that make up that event kind of conglomerate into this event object, right? But if you think about object records in HubSpot fundamentally, right? You got to think about what they're good for, right? They're good for collaboration, holding data, communication, tracking something that you're doing, right? Really everything that you used to do in spreadsheets before you came to HubSpot, right? How many of you have like managed your deals or your contact lists in a spreadsheet before, right? And all of a sudden you get this wildly easier and more organized and automated way of interacting with all of that stuff when you put it into a CRM. The same thing goes for these big, nasty, gnarly spreadsheets for your events, right? Everything's a column. Those are properties, right? You can add custom properties to these event objects, just like you can do to any other object that you hold information about in HubSpot, right? And, I remember, Chris, you and me were having a conversation about this as we're kind of like wrapping our heads around, what we've built here with the Event Hapily beta. And we were just looking at these spreadsheets going, man, this is what everyone else looks like when they're managing all this other stuff outside of HubSpot. This is no different, right? So I think what we're trying to do here is like encourage folks to say, hey, your CRM is a great place to be able to manage all this other stuff that goes into putting on the event, right? All the people you're communicating with, all of the expenses that you're incurring while setting up and getting ready to produce this event, right? Any sort of collaboration your team is actually doing, right? You can do that in your CRM. That's what HubSpot's built for, right? So I think that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. Chris, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I think Sleep makes a good point here in that he says, to be fair, HubSpot objects are a data table with a nice, shiny GUI spreadsheet with extra steps.
Yep.
Strong words, my friend.
He's not
Here's
wrong,
why
though.
it's at the base. Yeah, we need a place for data. But if we pick the place strategically and design it strategically, like HubSpot,
yep.
On that spreadsheet I showed, there was like a, rep is coordinating and we are supporting cost. Like that comment has like 100 emails.
Yep.
That gets sent back and forth behind it. There's like
statuses
files
of things.
that are sharing.
Right.
And that's where, since the spreadsheet is now in HubSpot, we can associate all these emails and all these things. And not only can we see it, whoever we want to see it can see it. And just the collaboration and the thing that's so hard to like, until you experience it yourself, is when we have to do it the next time. And we can just hit that clone button. Like, oh my gosh, dude, that's one of the best feelings ever.
Yeah. And it's almost as if thinking about like looking at it on a spreadsheet is almost like a 2-dimensional view. Getting it into your, CRM is like a 4-dimensional view, right? Because you can take something like a quick note, in a spreadsheet column, and that actually translates to being able to see conversations going back and forth, right? Getting other objects in the mix that give you more context into what the status of something currently is, right? Tasks that are assigned to people that need to get done, right? For that specific event. And it's like HubSpot on object records has all this stuff, right? So, everything that you saw on those columns, right? I think we're going to talk about a few different ways to kind of, approach this, right? It could be something as simple as creating custom properties on these event records that you're using to plan out and coordinate these events. And just having we look at something like those different expense columns that you had, right? That could be something just as easy as just creating a currency number field for a specific category that you're just putting numbers into, right? If that's how you want to do it, you can do it. You can also take a more customized approach, right? I've been talking a lot about, the reason managing events on HubSpot is so great is because you're not beholden to do it in a very specific way that like a third-party platform is like built to operate. You get to take advantage of HubSpot's extensibility and customization and manage events the way you want to do it, not the way some third-party app says you have to do it, right? So, a good example here is while Event Happily comes with 5 standard objects or 5 custom objects that we put in automatically, right? Those are your events, your registrants, your sessions, your speakers, and your sponsors, right? We inject a number of custom properties in there already for all the basic stuff you need that's kind of universal to everyone. But the big benefit of it being custom objects is you can expand on that. You can add more properties. You can build into use of other custom objects, right, that interact with those objects, right? Where you're not kind of stuck on rails and doing it only in the certain way a third-party app would function that doesn't have this same level of extensibility, right? So that's why I think, HubSpot makes it such a perfect place to be able to manage these bigger projects and do all the other things like tracking registration, attendance, blending it into your CMS elements on your website, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. And I think what I've seen with HubSpot, because these conversations can take a quick turn and all of a sudden we're spending more time like just managing data in the system, and we got to make sure this is connected to that, and everything starts breaking. In HubSpot, there is enough rails and enough guardrails that you can play and explore and understand how your data needs to work together in a way that's not going to like just kill you down the road and just create this burden.
Yeah.
So knowing that you're doing this inside of such a usable platform. So you're going to get use, you're going to get feedback, right? But also just the manageability and maintenance of it, just like everything else in the platform, is easier.
Yeah.
And that's why we can say, like, do whatever you want, because we know there's enough there that it's pretty hard to get yourself, into too much trouble without a bunch of custom coding workflows and, stuff like that. And the cool thing is to do what we're about to show you, it doesn't require, a lot of magic behind the scenes. Like, this is all like base HubSpot functionality. We're just giving the data a place to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? And you can experiment. You don't have to nail it perfectly the first time, right? Especially if you're a company just starting out with events, right? And you're learning as you go and you're developing your process, and you do one event and you learn from it and you go, man, we need to be able to track this like category of expenses versus just, a number value or something like that, right? You can build that into it over time and kind of perfect this as you go, right? Versus having like, a spreadsheet that all of a sudden, you've been using one way for a while, and then you got to deal with, changing around all the formulas and reformatting it and doing all this crazy stuff, right? That stuff's easier to iterate on in something like HubSpot, right? Yeah. So
heaven forbid, you delete the column that the formula relied on, and
you break the whole thing back. Right? Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Yeah. Cool. So why don't we start talking about what we've kind of like built here, right? So like,
can you zoom in? Can you zoom in a little bit for me?
Yeah.
A little bit easier. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Does that work? Is that good? I think it looks pretty good on the screen here. So cool. So again, HubSpot or Event Happily. What product am I talking about? I guess both. Event Happily comes with those 5, regular custom objects that we inject, and we build a lot of automation behind and things like that too as well. Right. But what we started thinking about as we were having this like conversation of just, how do we get out of the spreadsheets and how do we start thinking about tracking expenses and things like that? Right. I started playing around. We started tinkering a little bit. You could say we started building it. Right. Building happily, if you will. And so what I had as an idea, right, is like, sure, we could go add some custom properties for dollar amounts and build some formula fields off of things like that. Right. But a cooler way for us to maybe approach this was to think about things sort of like line items on a deal, right? And, I had this idea of like, man, it'd be really cool if like objects in HubSpot had this idea of like expenses, right? Where you could have something that sort of looks like, line items, on a record. But it was really just tracking like money you've spent on doing whatever that record actually like represents. And then I was sitting here just like, we can do this with a custom object. Like that's not that hard. It's not that crazy, right? Like we can literally do that, right? So, as a way to sort of like illustrate and inspire folks to think about how can you customize this system and make it your own, right? I was like, dude, let's go and let's build an event expenses. And I know we were going to build this on the show, but I got too excited and I just ended up doing it. Let's go and build an event expenses custom object, right? And what's cool about it, again, being a custom object is like, maybe you just associate your expenses to the actual event, but like, there's nothing that says you couldn't also just associate them to a session, right? Or split them among sessions, things like that. There's a whole bunch of funky ways you can do this, depending on how granular you want to get. Hey, kiddo, by the way, this is Eliza, everybody. I'm gonna bring Eliza in. This is my little assistant for the day. She's home with us, so she might be playing with some Legos or something while we're doing this. But Danny's got to talk about boring stuff. It's not boring. Just kidding.
Building as well. Building
Legos. Well. Exactly. If you want to show them what you made, just bring it over here. So hold on. I gotta do this. So we've got this event expenses object that we've built, right? And the way that I've created this is that we have these different objects, and these would basically like represent things you've spent money on, costs that you've incurred in order to produce and set this event up, right? So the idea here is like, I've got catering, I've got a swag order that we did, I've got what we're paying for the venue rental, right? You can also start to think about it as like, hey, is this like an event we're going to? And maybe we're like, doing like a sponsorship package or something like that. And we want to be able to track ROI from it, right? You could do this in a number of different ways. So the way it works is I just hit add, right? I could create a new expense. I could call it something. So we'll just say plane tickets, right? I can give it an amount. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
And this is as simple as it can be, and often a much better place to start than what I want to do, like with all the properties, right? And like, even for somebody who's familiar with the system, I see what Max, like I'd seen the output of these reports, and I'm like, all right, Max, can you give me the export of all the properties that are on this new object?
Yeah.
He's like, dude, it's just these 4 fields, man.
It's just some formula fields, right? And this is like, I've never had more fun playing with like middle panel extensions, right? Dude. That you can just make than this, first of all. But also, this is such a good use case for single object reports that live on CRM records, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just to kind of like finish up here, right? I also created a file field. Now I'm working out of a developer test portal right now. So developer test portals don't get the betas, but with that new update that they made to file fields, right? You'll have the ability to upload files on these create new record pages, right? So like imagine attaching like a quote or an invoice or a receipt for whatever this expense is that you're sort of working through, right? You can add stuff like that. I built a very simple status field of quoted, invoiced, paid. Again, custom properties, you can do whatever you want, right? The way I'm doing it is just inspiration, right? And then I could even see a world where maybe you add like a category, right? Or some like let's say you want to bucket expenses together. Like imagine for a second a single object report with or like a panel that you build called like budget or something, right? And you've got like a single object report. Maybe you have a property that's holding like total budget you have to work with for this event. Dude, this is where things start to get like really crazy, right?
So good.
And then like you could build a report that shows a pie chart of all the money you've spent so far, broken down by either the name of the expense or an expense category if you want to get like more in depth about it, right? Nothing's stopping you from doing this stuff. Like it's so cool. But anyway, so you just go create the expense and then you'll see it right here, right? So like think of it kind of like as line items on a deal. It's the same thing, except we're using a custom object, right? And we have more control over them than we would something like line items, right? So what I'm doing here is we're adding these different expenses. And then what I did is I created a formula field called total expenses. You could call this event cost. You could call this eventsment. You could call it total investment in the event, whatever. You could build multiple properties that tally up different categories of expenses and then have a total one. Sky's the limit. The world is your oyster. Manage these events in the way that you want, right? Again, just really kind of highlighting the power of HubSpot's customizability around this stuff. Build it the way you need to build it. And then the really cool thing that we're doing too is we're associating deals back to these events, right? Now, there's a lot of things that we're looking into in order to be able to like automatically associate deals to events and things like that based on like the contact and stuff. We're working on that. You'll probably see that in the future, right? But today, out of the box, right, the event schema that gets loaded into HubSpot has a relationship with deals. So it's literally just as simple as taking a deal and associating it back to the actual event that it came from, right? That's a pretty easy thing to do manually, right? We're looking into ways to making that easier and automated and things like that.
Right? Yeah, I love Salim's suggestion to Nikki here. You should bring accountants into a live webinar and have Max build this solution with them.
Oh God, I'm not smart enough to talk to accountants.
Dude, this blows people's mind, and it's easy to forget about when you're inside HubSpot, the ecosystem, and like other platforms. Most other platforms do not work this easily.
Yeah.
And when we start to talk about customer platform and end-to-end customer process that includes the people sending and receiving invoices and accounting, you show them stuff like this and they do have their mind blown. And
Yeah.
it's about like helping them with the change management to say, hey, we're not trying to replace these other systems where you need this information for like taxes and all this stuff. But what if we can do it over here where all the stuff that falls through the cracks, that creates problems, that creates mistakes, that ruins customer experiences, which
Mhm.
is like communications and then understanding the results of those things. This system is built to do that over here. So let's do it over here. And let's figure out how we make your job easier,
Mhm.
accountant or purchasing person or, budget manager. Right. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think also I want to talk about your quote, right? The thing that you said, imagine measuring the investment right next to the return, right? HubSpot customers talk about ROI all the time. It's a big old buzzword, right? But like what's cool is like we're literally showing you that right now. When you think about return on investment when it comes to events, the investment is what you're paying to put the event on. It's the time, it's the effort, it's everything you're going through to put this event on. The return, in its most literal sense, is often represented as the deals and the business you're closing because of this, right? And like maybe you don't use a deal record. Maybe you have a dollar amount sitting on a contact record somewhere, right? Or sitting on some other custom object. Or, maybe if you're a SaaS company using Stripe and you want to be able to associate like subscriptions back to this stuff that came from people you met at events, why not? Right? You could measure that return in a number of different ways, right? Maybe it isn't necessarily monetary, right? Maybe you're just looking for new customers you've generated because of this, and you're looking at raw counts of numbers, right? A lot of different things you can do. You can think about it in whatever way you need to.
New relationships, new partners.
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys that go to shows like principals, they go to shows looking for new distributors, looking for new manufacturer reps. And if you find that at that show, like that means, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, coming your way and it's not about credit here. Like I want to make sure it's not about attribution and who gets the credit and where. It's just about understanding the results of any time and effort and cost that we are putting into the system, right? And how they play together. And when you can see them all together, you can start to understand that very clearly. And then I haven't seen this in practice, but I feel like the transparency of HubSpot and the ease of visibility is going to take us towards, okay, I no longer need the 100 touch point, attribution report, right? We can just see very clearly, collectively, we did all these things and collectively we made all this money.
Yeah. I can even think of it like, I do partnerships here at Happily, right? When we go to inbound, we generate partnerships from that, right? And like, wouldn't it be great if I could quantify all these things that we're doing, right? Into like how many partnerships I'm generating, right? Like there's so many cool ways to look at this. But again,
and this is where when you can get out of the headspace of like CRM, like traditional CRM that's like helps sales, right? And we can only track sales conversations. Everything else is noise. Or like the campaigns tool where as good as I've always wanted that to be in the past, making sure all the assets are associated and just all this stuff. Like when you can boil it down to the data over here, all that stuff just gets a lot easier. And you're not limited to the value that whatever tool you're using has decided that's the return, right?
Yep.
And once you can treat HubSpot like the communication management platform that it is, you should have every human relation, in my opinion, every human relationship that you're trying to build for your business should be in HubSpot.
Yeah.
Because if it's not anywhere else. And if you're concerned about building partnerships, building other mechanisms, the communication is everything. And HubSpot helps you keep all those balls up in the air.
Yeah, dude, and you're also hitting on this whole other point of like, why manage events in HubSpot? Dude, if you guys put on a ton of events, that is your customer relationships, or it's at least a gigantic pillar of it, right? And managing such a big piece of that, right? It all of a sudden just kind of makes sense that you would manage that in your CRM, right?
Yes.
It is CR, right? Events are CR. E equals CR or whatever, MC squared or something like that, right? So yeah, just to give you like another little heads up of kind of like what we're doing here, right? We've got like our total expenses. We've got attributed deal revenue. Now you could look at this in a couple of different ways. Right now, I'm pulling in deals that have a closed won status, right? But maybe you want to look at something simpler, just like pipeline generated, right? Not necessarily what's closed yet, because maybe that's what you're getting measured on, right? In my case, I did closed, but then here I'm doing a formula that's basically just saying this number minus this number. And you can see we're in the negative right now. So maybe this event wasn't that successful, right? And then I'm doing a very simple ROI calculation. I can't remember the exact one, but it's this number divided by this number times 100, whatever. HubSpot allows you to do percentages now as the output for calculated fields, which is great, right? So you can see this data in a bunch of different ways. And then this is what you also got to think about. Yeah, you can manage it on the individual record, but what if you want to look at your events as a whole, right? This data can power some really awesome dashboards, right? So I've got a dashboards that I've started throwing together here.
Yeah.
And we have our own little return. Yeah, Chris, you're getting stoked, right? Oh, I heard that little squeal, buddy. This is weird.
Oh man, I'm excited, man.
Yeah, we are.
This stuff doesn't have to be hard.
It doesn't have to be hard.
There's no reason.
So easy, right?
You can't see this stuff.
Yeah. So like here, for example, I'm saying like, hey, of all of our events, here's our average event cost. Here's our average event revenue, our average event return on investment, our average cost per lead if we're like capturing leads at events, right? I've even got pipeline generated per event. If you want a quick glance at which one of your events were the most, successful at actually generating pipeline, right? That could have you look back when you do your year in review and say, hey, which events do we want to do more of? Because it's having an impact on the business, clearly, right? There's all these different things that you can do when you're harnessing the power of HubSpot objects and reporting. Chris, talk to me, dude. I can literally feel you radiating at me right now.
Oh, man.
I broke you, dude. I love this.
It's just my goodness. There's just so much value. And this is where like trust and trying it for yourself, those are a part of this puzzle. But like, this is not difficult to put together once you have the data in the system. Once you've decided to be strategic with these motions that you're already doing, right?
Yep.
Like the spreadsheet I showed, like we don't even need the properties ahead of time. We can import the spreadsheet and create the properties if that's what it takes to get this thing done.
For sure.
And to be able to move forward in that way, the challenging education part of HubSpot right now is we're only scratching the surface of what's possible here. And I think the key is the hard part is definitely just the decision to want this and then do it. But then understand that HubSpot is the best place for it. Because anywhere else you do it, it's going to serve maybe one or two like very specific purposes. If you put it in HubSpot, you can leverage it literally all over the business.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Chris, can I do something a little bit impromptu right now? I want to invite my director of marketing, who you can see is losing her marbles in the chat right now, because she's actually done a lot of event stuff in the past. And do you mind if we bring her in and get some raw thoughts on what she's saying.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah,
All right,
let's
Nikki, I
do
sent
it.
you an invite if you want to hop into it. It's just the StreamYard. But while we're waiting for Nikki to hop on, we should build something right now, Chris. I think what we should do is say, okay, we've built this little like mechanism on our events object, right? Being those expenses, right? What if we wanted to do that example that I gave earlier of like, all right, I want to see our expenses sort of categorized, and then we want to build a report on it that shows on the event object. Let's like show people how easy this is, right?
Yes.
So why don't we do this? Let's go into our settings here. And Nikki might pop on at any moment, and we'll have her give her raw thoughts when she's in here, right? But let's go take a look at our custom objects. We've got our event expense one. So, just to kind of show everybody how easy this is. Nope, I don't want to edit the custom object. What am I doing? I want to edit the properties. Let's go and create a property, and let's put it under event expense information, and let's call this cost category. I can't spell cost category, right? And let's do something simple here where we just do a drop down select. And like, what are some of the typical things we see here, Chris? Like travel, exhibit, food and dining. I'll just call it food. Oh, wait. Oh, exhibit.
All right.
Food.
Nikki's here. I'm going to bring her in.
Yes. Meals. Nikki.
Hey, Nikki.
I feel like a celebrity being on here.
Yes, you are a celebrity. We love Nikki. Nikki, while I'm setting this up in the background, I know you've done a lot of stuff with events in the past. Talk to me about what you're seeing, and more importantly, what you're feeling, and just give us the raw brainwaves right now.
The funny part is I've seen this so many times at this point, and every time I look at it, I'm still like, oh, the amount of hours and stress and just brain space I could have saved by having this solution when I was only doing events. It makes me want to cry. That's the happiest tears. It's so insane that everything could be so centralized in one spot, and like being able to tell that story to your leadership team to be like, okay, this event is just really not doing anything. We're seeing the same people over and over. It's not generating anything for us. And you always get that, well, we've just always done it, so we're going to do it like this. And to be able to be like, okay, but look at all the money that we're just hemorrhaging and not making a single dime or a single impact on that. It's hard to dispute the data there. And the fact that like you don't have to keep a spreadsheet updated, like everybody has good intentions with that at the end of the day. Like, sure, you have a spreadsheet, you're going to update it for maybe like the duration of your event, maybe like the 4 weeks after your event while you're keeping things moving. And then it goes to the graveyard. Like you're never going to touch it ever again. And this way, like you can just continuously keep it updated. If something hits 9 months down the line, you can still take it back to your event, which is awesome.
Yeah. And
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Not only for it's pretty easy to hammer events for their costs and how much money could be saved. But like on the other side, we might spend so much money on the booth, and then we finally try this VIP experience that is significantly less amount of money, but maybe only 10 people show up, right? But like 8 out of those 10 like opportunities happen. And there's just a clear, if we can show the value of that event, that little event, then it's like, hey, last year, like there should be no argument whether or not we should do this VIP event.
Right.
Like next to it, maybe we should do that instead and forget about the main. Like I've seen that happen. Like companies are doing that, right? And so like it goes both ways of being able to show, hey, this is where the money worked. Let's do more of that, right?
You can get smarter and smarter with it. And I've done that before where it's like, hey, yeah, we sunk $50,000 into this sponsorship, but you know what? Those little like VIP dinners afterwards that are a quarter of the cost are way more impactful. And like within a CRM, it's kind of hard to tie that back, at least in like traditional fashions. But this way, it's so easy to just pull it up and be like, yo, here was 2021's $75,000 sponsorship on this event that we did. And here's the 10 grand that we spent on 2022. To be able to just see that in front of you, black and white, is, again, my mind is still
Right. And this gets to like, since we're doing it here and like it helps you standardize, but also keep like, the personal approach in that you've got a sales team, you've got people going to these events and, sometimes the sales guy with all the, relationships, either leaves or he's going into management and needs other people to start executing like the way he was. And so much gets lost where these guys and gals are like, they're the natural, just people lovers, and they just build relationships, and you're just in awe because they're at these events. They go there knowing that they're always going to be having lunch and dinner with somebody that matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not every person can do that. So when you try to get that out of your next salesperson and there's no process, like they just go and maybe they have some conversations. But when you look back and you say, man, this dude is just killing it. What do you like, instead of getting mad at the guy who is not just inherently built to do that, like you give him the space to say, hey, here's exactly how you do it. We can even help you set up some of these meetings beforehand, right? All of this is possible like with this kind of structure in place.
Yeah. So what I did here while you guys were chatting is I went and I added this cost category field, right? So like, let's use this scenario and actually build something here where it's like, hey, we want to look at an event and we want to see a report categorized on all the different expenses that we've added to it, right? Once you've kind of done this bit where I've just added the property here and I've made it so I can see it like on this little card, this is just an association card. Let's actually go build like a single object report here. Right. So I'm going to pop into this new navigation. I can't figure it out. Here we go. So we're going to pop into reports. I'm going to create a report. Now, when you're putting reports on objects, you need to do it as a single object report. All right. It doesn't let you do it for the custom report builder yet. Right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose this event expenses object. Right. And then let's just do something simple here where we're doing like a pie chart. Okay. And there's really nothing that I need to do in order to, let's do the amount in here. And then let's actually come back to my data. I have to add cost category, right? So we should be able to do total amount, cost category, right? And there we go, right? So I've got, this is showing, I've got a whole bunch of like other stuff here, but here's the thing. I'm not even going to add any other filters here because this is the beauty of reports on records. It automatically adds the filters, right? So what's really cool here is when I go and put this on an event, a hapily event object, right? What's going to happen is it's only going to include expenses that are associated to that object, and it's going to filter everything else out. So I'm not going to do anything wacky here. I'm just building out my visualization, right? So let me save this. I'm not going to add it to a dashboard. Everyone can see it, right? And let's come out of here. And I am going to go and get back into my event. Right? It's probably a faster way to do what I'm doing here. I guarantee there is. And I'm going to customize our tabs up here. All right, we're going to go edit the default view. And then we are going to go look at this event ROI tab that I made. We're going to add a card. And let's do a report card in this case. And I need to create a card. Sorry, I should have just hit create card. I don't know why I did that. And let's do this cost breakdown of event, right? I'm going to give it the same internal name because I don't want it to get fancy. And then we're going to choose that custom event expenses report, right? So let me hit save. I really hope this works out or I'm going to look like a dweeb. There it is.
Of course it's going to work.
Dude, it's that easy. It's that easy.
It's going to work.
And then like, even imagine saying it's like, all right, when we put on this event, leadership tells us that we have, X amount of dollars to spend on this event, right? you could have a property on the event record that says total budget, right? And then you could have another formula field that shows you budget remaining. And then what you could do is you could put those on these data highlight cards right above this, and you literally see how much your budget is. So if it changes, you can add to it, right? You know, people might say, hey, we're getting a lot of registrations. Let's pump some more money into this thing, right? You change whatever that final budget ends up being. And then you do a formula field that subtracts the total amount of expenses from that total budget, and you can see budget remaining, right? And then you'd be able to do, put that right above the breakdown so you can see where you've spent this budget, right? And see what you're spending your money.
Beautiful.
Guys, HubSpot's not an accounting system, but if you're trying to like plan your events and all the expenses and everything around it, it kind of gets pretty close, right?
Yeah, your spreadsheet isn't an accounting system either.
Exactly.
Right.
Especially if it's an offline one that's not even connected to anywhere in the cloud, forget it. Like,
yes.
So
things like travel, for example, are things that really fall through the cracks when it comes for event management too. Like, you'll have an event that maybe it'd be like the biggest event of the year and everybody on your team wants to go, and you come out of the event like, how did I spend so much money? Like, we only had this amount, put aside for that. And then you go back and look, we spent 25 grand on travel. Like, we busted everything. And now you can take it and you can plan a little bit better on like who needs to be there, who actually should be there, who doesn't need to be there. And then you just have a little bit more of an opportunity to plan smarter and plan better rather than things just kind of being all willy-nilly everywhere. This is
so when you were working on spreadsheets, did you look into tools to help you do it? Not in spreadsheets. They were
expensive. The problem is that they were expensive. And even at the end of the day, I mean, this is going back, I'm not going to disclose my age, but this is going back some years ago. And it was when, integrations weren't as robust. The fact that this can sit directly on your records in your CRM where you don't have to go anywhere, so you don't need to learn a new tool. You don't need to there's no ramp up time whatsoever, which is insane. So even if I were to go to my leadership team who might be a little less, inclined to poke around on HubSpot, but they're used to it, just be like, yo, they know it. They know what this looks like. They know what they're getting themselves into. And to me, that's just one less hurdle that you have to jump over to get to get to.
And being able to build it in one record. So anybody who sees this is going to see the same URL at the top, but then who they are and how they're logged into the system, they might see completely different things. And this is it's challenging because it sounds way too good to be true.
It sounds way too easy.
And the hard thing is
way
that
too easy, guys.
It's like, this is truly as far as we've gotten, I think, from any technology perspective. Like, I'm not going to say it can do everything as a platform, but it's the closest I've seen that includes everybody in the business. And why does it need to? Because all of your customer facing teams need to be in sync all the time. Yeah. And if you can do that, and literally, and I don't think the costs are going to get close anytime. The amount of money that it takes to do this is so minimal compared to the platforms that you have to pay for to just do webinars.
You would need 4 different platforms to do this.
Budget management systems. Like, those things cost a lot of money. And the fact that you can get all of this here is just, it's so
hey
good.
Guys, and hey, talk about cost. It's $150 a month or $130 a month for an enterprise sales seat.
Right. So many of these people are one person shows with their spreadsheets, and they could have all this. Like, there's not, outside of what Max just said, for those people that just need a little bit of help and stop doing stuff out of spreadsheets, there's not a huge cost barrier anymore. No. And what he's doing, obviously, when he created the reports, he knows HubSpot, so he knows where to click on stuff. And this is the value of, working with somebody to get this done. But the thing is anybody who you're going to work with, because we're using HubSpot, you know how hard it is to say you have to use us for everything in the future because it's
Yeah.
happening in HubSpot? Our goal is to help you do the setup so that you don't need us anymore for that specific thing, right?
Yeah.
Empower you, because that's the only way the system even works.
Yeah.
If you got to go to somebody else to fix stuff, add a property, like do a report, these systems, don't get used. But the fact that you don't have to do that when it comes to HubSpot, the power, man.
You know, I just thought about what might even be interesting to take this a step further. And I'm not going to build it right now just because we don't have time. But, what do you do when you have like expenses that you like share or want to spread across events, right? Maybe you buy some awesome, I don't know, like thing you use at your booth or whatever, right? And you're saying like, hey, the next 3 events, we want to kind of spread this cost across, right? What you could do is you could have a custom property on an expense record that counts the total number of events it's associated to, and then have a formula field that takes whatever the cost of the event is, divides it by that, and then updates the amount field that way, right? And then every single time you add that cost to an event, it auto recalculates its amount just by adding it there. Think about doing that in a spreadsheet, bro.
Like,
Right.
You don't have any brains left after that.
Right. No, and here's the thing, Joel, we've got you, right? Joel says, can I export it to Excel for management that won't look at HubSpot?
Yeah.
Can you go back to your dashboard? Can you go back to your dashboard real quick, Max?
Yep.
Like we can send this, like just like this is where the fact that you're doing it in the system, the scheduled reporting sends, the emailing it to whoever wants it, right? In PowerPoints, in CSVs.
A zip of pings, a zip of PNGs if you want to do that, right? But yeah, totally. Because there's still a data table in the back end, right? Like it's going to be able to easily export to a CSV, right? Heck, use custom object APIs to pull this data out into like another system if you need to do that, right? Like maybe you have like an expense management tool that you want to pipe into this in some way. Like you can do it. You can do it. Yeah. Cool, man.
It's good, man. Well, this has been, man, you're
super
doing
fun.
Some really cool stuff over there. You must be having a blast.
Yeah. And yeah, Salim, I am talking like a HubSpot expert. And the reality is I am, right? And these things take time to learn. However, people can learn them, right? And it's possible, right? And you work with the right partner, like you guys, right? You can pull this stuff off, but it's all about finding creative ways to use this stuff that might not be that obvious at the surface. It's more than tracking deals and leads. You know what I mean? But yeah.
Much
visuals
more.
alone on this. I mean, unless you are an Excel wizard, you're not even getting visuals like this. So the fact that you can just see how clean everything is, your data is, and to me, that's a non-negotiable at this point. Like I would never be able to do another event moving forward without having this at my fingertips.
Let's go. That's what I love to hear.
Right?
Cool, man. All right. I gotta wrap up for another call, but this has been super great. Chris, do you have any closing words?
Yes. No, man. This has been awesome. I love where you guys are going with this. This just speaks so much to just the value of taking a minute to figure out what you want to do, with a platform like HubSpot. From the perspective of, sometimes it's easier just to say like, okay, where are all our spreadsheets?
Yep.
Can we get them into HubSpot? And what would that look like, right? Just start considering. And that's when the value of this tool just explodes, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, Salim, to your point, it can be and should be considered the most important tool for the business. And yes, you should have somebody in charge of that tool, making sure it's working for anybody who needs to use it.
And has the ability to look at the bigger picture too, right? And translate that into what does it mean to work for everybody, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work, man. And we'll keep on building stuff.
And Nikki, thank you for impromptu hopping in and giving your raw, unadulterated thoughts on this. Really appreciate it.
I'll work
Yes.
on my beard for next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't do that. All right,
On
guys.
that note,
This was fun.
keep finding the opportunities, everybody, and let's grow.
Rock on.
Have a good one.
Later.
See you guys.
Later.
Say bye.